The sea was like glass that morning, smooth and unbroken beneath a cloudless sky. 5 figures moved purposefully along the dock, laughter rising above the hum of engines and the gulls overhead. Liam walked ahead, the unofficial leader, his weathered hands checking the rigging one last time. Sarah followed, pale hair tied back, her eyes already scanning the water as if she could see the secrets beneath. Marcus adjusted the GPS, its screen blinking steadily, while Daniel unpacked his camera gear, lens already fogged with the damp coastal air. Chloe, smallest of the group but sharp-eyed, knelt by the equipment cases, fingers moving fast over cables and battery packs. The Bermuda Triangle. It wasn't just a myth to them, it was a question, a challenge, and they were ready to answer it. They pushed off just after dawn, the old trawler groaning but steady as it nosed past the harbor mouth. Fishermen raised hands in passing, a few muttered prayers. Beyond the reef, the world opened, vast and glittering, and the 5 were a speck on the horizon. By noon, the coast was gone, compass steady, coordinates locked. They crossed into the edge of the triangle, joking at first, "Watch for aliens," but with attention just beneath the surface. Marcus marked their position, Sarah prepped the dive plan, Liam ran a last check on the oxygen tanks, Daniel filmed the rituals, getting close-ups of the worn faces, the laughter, the nerves. Chloe wired up the boat-to-shore radio, voice crisp over the static. "Base, this is Echo. We are green. Repeat, we are green." Then, nothing. Somewhere past 2 p.m., the first call cut out mid-word. Another burst of static, a half-heard laugh, a single, sharp breath. After that silence, no distress signal, no SOS, no sign of malfunction. The Coast Guard logged the time, 2:14 p.m. Families waited for calls that never came. Search planes swept empty sea. A boat that should have been visible on radar simply was not. The Bermuda Triangle had claimed 5 more souls. Or so it seemed. Because 8 years later, on a dawn much like the one they'd left under, a man staggered out of the surf on a Bahamian beach, skin salt-burned, eyes hollow. And the only word he said was, "Liam." Liam was the one who had pulled them together. A veteran of deep wreck dives and coral conservation, his name carried weight. He was the reason the funding came through, the reason the crew trusted each other, the reason they were there at all. Sarah was the scientist, calm, methodical, the one who spoke in notes and measurements but whose love for the sea ran deeper than words. Her research on reef ecosystems had taken her across oceans, but the Bermuda Triangle haunted her like an unfinished chapter. Marcus handled navigation, the quiet one, ex-Navy, with a mind for maps and currents. He charted their course, plotted every waypoint, his fingers light on the instruments. If Liam was heart, Marcus was backbone. Daniel filmed everything. The plan was a documentary. The myths, the science, the people daring to test the line between. His camera had seen coral spawning at midnight, humpbacks breaching in silence, divers surfacing with treasure. But this was his chance to capture the unknown. And Chloe, youngest, tech prodigy, the kind of mind that could rewire a sonar array while explaining quantum entanglement between bites of a protein bar. She'd designed half the equipment herself. Without her, there was no expedition. They weren't thrill seekers. They weren't storm chasers. They were explorers in the old sense, curious, stubborn, unwilling to leave the dark corners unlit. Why the Bermuda Triangle? Because no one could agree on the truth. Because pilots had reported instruments going mad. Because ships vanished without debris. Because compasses spun. Because myths had roots, and sometimes those roots reached deeper than anyone wanted to admit. For Sarah, it was science. For Daniel, the story. For Marcus, precision. For Chloe, the challenge. For Liam, maybe it was something quieter, something he hadn't told them. They left behind families, colleagues, small apartments filled with plants and books, half-read messages, unpaid bills. They left with gear checked, plans filed, promises made. They left expecting to return. But the sea and whatever waited inside that stretch of mapless blue had other plans. The sun climbed higher as the boat sliced through open water, the hull creaking with each rise and fall. By now the coastline was a memory, left behind in the gray smear of dawn. The ocean around them was an endless sheet of blue, flawless and shimmering. Overhead, gulls had vanished. Even the waves had gone strangely still, as if holding their breath. Chloe sat cross-legged on the deck, fingers flicking across her tablet, frowning at the occasional blip of interference. Liam stood at the helm, jaw tight, eyes shaded beneath his cap. Sarah pressed a hand to the rail, watching the surface churn. "This is the line," Marcus murmured beside her, his voice almost lost in the wind. "We're crossing it now." They had marked the coordinates weeks ago, the unofficial edge of the Bermuda Triangle, a place where maps blurred and compasses forgot which way was home. A place heavy with stories, whispered warnings, pilots who spoke of instruments that failed mid-air, sailors who swore by lights dancing over black water. At first, the air was electric with possibility. Daniel filmed everything, the shimmer of heat on the deck, Chloe's determined scowl, Marcus tracing lines on the chart, Sarah laughing softly when Liam teased her about superstition. They posed by the rail, shouted over the wind, made mock-serious predictions about sea monsters and magnetic storms. But as afternoon deepened, the mood shifted. The sky stayed too bright, too wide, the sun fixed at a strange angle, casting sharp shadows that seemed wrong. The temperature rose despite the open sea. Chloe's instruments flickered. Marcus frowned over the compass, tapping it, then shaking it harder than necessary. "Feel that?" Sarah asked once, laying a palm flat on the deck. "It's humming." Above them, Liam cut the engine. Silence. Not the expected hush, but a dense, pressing quiet that made Daniel lower his camera without thinking. The five stood in a loose circle, eyes darting between each other, hearing only the slap of water against metal. "Test call," Chloe muttered, moving to the radio. "Echo to base, come in." A crackle. "Base, Echo, come in." Another crackle. Then, a voice-distorted, halting words smeared by static. "To hear that." Chloe adjusted the dial, hand trembling now. Liam reached to steady her shoulder. "Echo to base." "Repeat, echo to base. Do you copy?" A burst, louder this time. Marcus leaned in, brow furrowed. Sarah hugged her arms to her chest. Daniel raised his camera again, fingers slick. Then came the last sound they would hear. A single, sharp inhale, too close to the mic. A half-formed word, "Leah," and the line went dead. Not a fade, not a slow drift into white noise. Dead. Chloe sat frozen, mouth open. Marcus slammed his palm against the console, tried every channel. Liam stood very still, hand still on her shoulder, eyes fixed on the horizon that had suddenly gone darker. Daniel caught it all, though his hands shook so hard the footage blurred. Chloe calling, Marcus cursing, Sarah whispering something under her breath. And outside the frame, beyond the reach of any lens, the ocean waited, still, watching. The last transmission was logged at 2:14 p.m. No one on shore ever answered. The call came in just after dusk. A routine check from the harbor station. Had anyone heard from the Echo? The response was casual at first. Not yet. Maybe their signal's weak. Maybe they're delayed. But as night deepened and no update came, the tone sharpened. By midnight, the Coast Guard was mobilized. A helicopter lifted off before dawn, slicing through thick clouds as radar scanned the empty stretch between Florida and Bermuda. The pilot called in coordinates, voice clipped, eyes flicking between the screens and the blue-black vastness below. Boats followed, churning water, leaving white scars across the surface. They swept the search grid again and again. No distress beacon, no emergency ping, not even a flicker on the radar. By noon the next day, families waited at the dock, eyes fixed on the horizon, phones clenched in shaking hands. Liam's wife sat in her car, staring at the dashboard. Sarah's brother paced the marina. Chloe's father stared out to sea, as if willing her to appear. Rescue teams expanded the perimeter. Planes joined, low-flying, roaring over empty water. Searchers scanned for anything: an oil slick, a floating piece of hull, a shred of tarp or life jacket. The sea gave back nothing. At the command center, maps covered in red lines sprawled across tables. Marcus's last coordinates blinked like a heartbeat on the screen. One official murmured, "It's like they sailed off the edge." By nightfall, the first quiet conversations had started. How long could 5 people survive? How long before it was no longer a rescue but a recovery? No one dared speak it aloud, but they all felt it. The Bermuda Triangle had taken them. The story hit local news before the second night fell. 5 divers missing off Bermuda. A small headline with a grainy photo of the crew smiling on the dock. By morning, it was everywhere. Major networks ran loops of the last known footage. Liam adjusting his gear, Chloe laughing, Daniel pointing his camera, Sarah waving from the rail, Marcus focused on the charts. Experts filled screens, debating theories. Equipment failure, rogue wave, methane bubbles from the ocean floor, and of course the word no one could resist: supernatural. Talk shows ran specials on the cursed zone. Old pilots recounted compasses spinning, strange lights, missing time. Internet sleuths dissected every detail, chasing patterns no one else saw. Families were besieged, microphones thrust forward, questions shouted, photos stolen from social media. Did they believe in the triangle? Were they scared to go? Do you think they'll come back? As days passed, the frenzy only grew. News vans lined the docks. Memorials sprang up overnight: candles, notes, photos. And somewhere far from the cameras, beneath a sky no longer charted, the sea kept its silence. Liam's wife, Emily, kept the porch light on. Every night, it became a ritual: flip the switch, check the clock, whisper the same words under her breath: "Come home." Their 2 daughters stopped asking when he'd be back after the first week. She caught them once, huddled by the window, pressing their hands to the glass as if they could pull him home by sheer will. Sarah's brother, Tom, drove to the marina every morning. He sat in his truck staring at the empty slip, imagining her stepping off the boat, sunburned and laughing, apologizing for the scare. But the longer he waited, the harder it was to believe she ever would. Marcus's mother taped his photo by the kitchen sink. She wasn't sure why, maybe so she wouldn't forget his face, maybe so she couldn't. She cleaned the same counter 3 times a day, listening to the news on low volume, flinching every time they said missing. Daniel's girlfriend, Ava, scrolled through his old videos, fingers trembling as she watched his smiling face fill the frame, camera tilted as if he was always mid-laugh, always half in love with the world. She tried to post updates, but the comments spiraled: prayers, accusations, theories. She stopped logging in. Chloe's dad, Mark, sat at her desk. He ran his fingers over the notebooks, the scribbled equations, the half-finished projects. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just sat, night after night, in the room that still smelled faintly of her shampoo, waiting for a sound that never came. Days stretched into weeks. Hope dulled at the edges, worn thin by time. The search crews thinned. The news cycle moved on. But for the families, there was no next story. There was only this: an ache that settled in the bones, a clock that no longer counted hours, only loss. Theories filled the void before facts could. Was it weather? A freak storm? A rogue wave? A sudden squall that swallowed them whole? But the skies were clear, the forecasts calm. Equipment failure? Chloe's tech was state-of-the-art, Marcus's navigation airtight. Still, some said a cascading malfunction, a perfect storm of errors. Piracy? Smugglers? Darker ideas crept in: hijacking, ransom gone wrong, human trafficking. Yet no calls came, no demands. Then came the stranger theories. A magnetic anomaly that scrambled compasses. A methane burst from the ocean floor that swallowed the boat. Time slips, parallel dimensions, alien abduction. Internet forums exploded. Amateur sleuths dissected weather data, ship logs, archived radio transmissions. They mapped supposed vortexes, compared the echo's path to centuries of disappearances. One viral post claimed to have decoded a hidden message in the last transmission. They're here. Reporters leaned in, fueling the spectacle. Specials aired on late-night TV. The Bermuda Triangle, science or superstition. Guests in polished suits debated. Experts shook their heads. Survivors of other near-misses told eerie tales. Vanishing stars, sudden calm, humming from below. For the families, it was a nightmare with too many mouths. Every day brought a new version of what might have happened, each one chipping away at the memory of who their loved ones were. But through it all, one question rose and lingered, silent, sharp as a blade. What if they were still out there? 8 years. That's how long the ocean stayed quiet. The families marked time not in days but in seasons, in birthdays missed, in anniversaries unspoken. Liam's daughters grew into young women, their father's face fading on the mantel, his voice surviving only in voicemail recordings Emily played late at night. Sarah's brother Tom moved inland, away from the coast, but every spring the salt air pulled at his chest, heavy with something he couldn't name. Marcus's mother stopped watching the news but kept the kitchen radio on, just in case. Ava never deleted Daniel's number, though the line went cold long ago. Mark kept Chloe's room untouched, a shrine of notebooks and soldered circuits, the faintest trace of her perfume sealed into the air. The world moved on. The Bermuda Triangle receded into legend. Another headline filed under Unsolved. Documentaries came and went. Podcasts retold the story, voices slick with curiosity but thin on grief. Tourists snapped photos by the marina, pointing at the memorial plaque, names etched in bronze beneath a carved wave. Every year, on the anniversary, the families gathered. No cameras now, no reporters. Just a circle of folding chairs on the dock, a wreath lowered to the sea. Words were spoken, though they blurred in memory. Prayers, promises. The same sharp question carried in every bowed head. Why? 8 years. Enough for the world to forget. But not the sea. It was a fisherman who saw him first, a figure at dawn, stumbling along a stretch of Bahamian shore so remote even the locals avoided it. At first, he thought it was driftwood, then a seal, then, impossibly, a man. Skin cracked and salt-burned, feet bare and bloodied, ribs sharp beneath sagging skin, clothes that had once been something a wetsuit, now little more than tatters. He moved like something half remembering how to walk, knees buckling with every step, mouth working around sounds that refused to form. By the time the fisherman reached him, the man had collapsed, face buried in the sand, body heaving with shallow, ragged breath. When they turned him over, his lips moved again, salt and blood crusting his teeth. One word. A name. Liam. And just like that, the world came roaring back. They ran the prints 3 times. The local authorities didn't believe it at first. A sunburned, skeletal man pulled from the Bahamian shore, barely able to speak, clutching at the sand as if it might vanish beneath him. He was rushed to the clinic, an IV threaded into an arm gone bone-thin, salt burns on his lips, half-conscious but alive. When they asked for his name, he could only whisper one word. Liam. They sent the prints to Nassau, then to the States. The result came back overnight, a sharp clinical ping across the screen. Marcus Hale, age 35 when he disappeared. The navigator of the Echo, presumed dead for 8 years. Emily was the first to be called. She didn't answer the phone, so they knocked on her door, uniformed men on her porch, the same posture they'd worn the day they told her Liam was gone. This time, they didn't carry condolences, they carried a name. Word spread fast. Reporters swarmed the hospital by noon. The families arrived by nightfall, pale with hope, trembling with the weight of it. Sarah's brother, Chloe's father, Daniel's girlfriend. They sat in cold plastic chairs, clutching each other's hands, waiting for a man they had buried long ago. Inside, Marcus lay beneath thin hospital sheets, eyes fluttering, mouth dry, skin stretched taut across his skull. Machines beeped softly beside him, nurses whispered. His fingers twitched, as if gripping something only he could feel. They confirmed the impossible. Marcus was alive. But the man in the bed, he was not the Marcus they remembered. It took hours before he could form sentences. The first thing he asked for was water. The second was Liam. The doctors wanted to wait, to stabilize him, but Marcus fought the sedatives, forcing words past cracked lips, voice rough as sandpaper. "Listen," he rasped, eyes darting between the faces hovering at his bedside. "You have to listen." They leaned in. "It wasn't a storm," he whispered. "Not a wave. Not equipment." He spoke in fragments. Images. Shards. "The sky went wrong," he murmured. "The stars, they moved." His fingers clawed at the sheets, eyes wild, seeing something far away. "The water, it lifted. We went under. But not—" He broke off, shaking, breath hitching. A nurse tried to soothe him, but Marcus flinched, whispering hoarsely, "No, you don't understand." He stared past them all, past the walls, past the world. "We weren't in the water," he said, barely audible now. "We were, somewhere else." At first, Marcus's voice was little more than a dry rasp, words slipping out between shallow breaths. But as the hours passed, as fluids worked through his veins and his body remembered how to be here, the fragments sharpened. He spoke of the sea, but not as anyone knew it. "It wasn't the waves," he murmured, staring at the ceiling, fingers twitching against the sheet. "It was the water, but it wasn't." They leaned in closer. "The water rose," he whispered. "It wasn't a wave. It wasn't weather. It lifted, like the whole ocean bent upward, like it was reaching for the sky." His breath hitched. "And then the sky folded down." He closed his eyes, voice thin. "We saw stars in the water," Marcus murmured, "not reflected, beneath, like we were above them, like we were falling up." In the corner, a doctor shook his head softly, murmuring about trauma, about hallucination, but Emily didn't look away. Neither did Mark, nor Ava, nor Tom. They just listened. "Liam stood at the helm," Marcus whispered. He gripped the rail so hard his knuckles split. Chloe was at the console. She was screaming, trying to reset everything. Daniel was filming. Sarah was on her knees, praying, I think. He opened his eyes, watery and far away. "The last thing I remember," Marcus said, voice breaking, "was Liam turning to me and saying, 'Do you see it too?'" Then his face crumpled. "I wish I hadn't." The first night was chaos. Marcus remembered the sudden silence first. Not the peaceful hush of open water, but a dense, choking absence, like the sea itself had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. The engine stuttered, then died. Chloe's voice snapped through the dark, sharp with panic. "Systems down, no signal." Marcus rushed to the console, tapping, shaking, slamming his palm against unresponsive screens. The compass needle spun madly, faster than it should, a dizzying blur. Daniel's camera light flicked across the deck, catching Liam's face, clenched jaw, wild eyes, hands white-knuckled on the helm. Sarah shouted something, but her voice twisted, warped, as if the air stretched it thin. Above them, the sky writhed. Stars smeared into long, curving trails, bending across blackness like paint brushed across wet glass. The water, too, was wrong. It didn't crash or slap or swell. It pulsed a slow, unnatural rise and fall, as if the sea itself had become something alive, something watching. Marcus gripped the edge of the console, knuckles aching. "The GPS, it's gone," he choked. "It's just—" He remembered Chloe turning, eyes wide, mouth parted. "Marcus," she whispered. Then the boat shuddered. A sound, deep and low, vibrated through the hull, through their bones, through the air itself. Not thunder, not wind. Something older. Something waiting. The days blurred, though Marcus wasn't sure they were days at all. The sun hung too long, or not at all. Sometimes they drifted beneath an endless twilight, the horizon a thin smear of bruised light, the sea as smooth as glass. Other times the sky rippled, stars bending into arcs, the sun rising from the wrong edge. The boat floated, its systems dead, the echo reduced to a shell. They rationed what they had: protein bars, bottled water, a small stash of fruit, but it was never enough. Liam scraped condensation off the railings. Sarah cracked ice packs from the medical kit, letting them melt on her tongue. At night, they heard it. beneath. A slow scrape, like a massive body brushing the hull. Sometimes a knock, gentle but deliberate, as if testing the shape of them. The ocean was deep and black and endless, but something moved there, circling just out of sight. Daniel tried to film it, leaning over the rail, camera trembling in his hands, whispering to himself. Chloe kept rewiring the comms, fingers raw, refusing to give up. Liam never left the helm. Sarah sat cross-legged on the deck, staring at the sky that refused to stay still. Marcus watched them all, feeling the edges of himself fray. The sea was too quiet, the air too thin, time folded, hunger gnawed. And beneath it all, that sound, the steady, patient whisper of something waiting below. Daniel was the first. No splash, no cry. One moment he was there, crouched at the rail, camera pressed to his eye. The next absence, a gap where his body should have been, the lens still rolling, the strap tangled on the deck. They searched for him, called his name, leaned over the edge until Liam yanked Marcus back by the collar. Then Chloe. Hours? Days? None of them knew. She was inside, huddled by the console, mumbling equations, tracing wires with shaking fingers. Marcus blinked, just once, and she was gone. Her tools clattered to the floor, a faint warmth where she'd been sitting, the smell of static in the air. Panic gave way to something worse, numbness. Sarah stopped speaking. Liam stopped blinking. Marcus sat with his back against the wall, fists clenched, heart hammering in his throat. The ocean stretched out, silent and smooth. The sky rippled. And beneath their feet, something moved. The sea spat them out as if it had tired of the game. Marcus remembered fragments, a swell rising beneath the boat, a heave that sent the world tilting, the sharp burn of salt in his mouth. Liam's hands gripping his shoulders. Sarah's voice ragged in his ear, the two of them clinging to debris as the echo finally vanished beneath the surface without a sound. When Marcus woke, his face was pressed to wet sand, lips cracked, skin raw. The sky overhead was a smear of purple and gold, stars hanging unnaturally low, as if draped just beyond reach. Liam staggered along the shore, pulling Sarah from the shallows, both of them trembling, skeletal shapes. The island rose behind them, dark against the sea, jagged cliffs, black rock, trees twisted into unfamiliar shapes. No birds, no waves breaking, just silence. Marcus crawled up the beach, lungs burning, dragging himself to where Liam crouched, staring wide-eyed at the tree line. This can't be, Marcus rasped. They should have been in open water, miles from anything. No charts had marked an island here. No satellites, no maps, no passing ships. Sarah knelt, pressing her palms into the sand as if feeling for something beneath. She was whispering to herself, lips moving soundlessly, eyes flicking from the sky to the trees to the shore. Marcus sat back, heart hammering, mouth dry. Somewhere, deep in the island's belly, the earth hummed. It was the first night when the lights came. Marcus saw them through half-closed eyes, body heavy with exhaustion, mind stretched thin from hunger and salt and terror. They flickered at the tree line, pale blue at first, then shifting, warping, pulsing in patterns that made his skin prickle. Not fire, not stars. Shapes that moved with a purpose, bending through the trees, dancing along the black rock. Liam watched, jaw clenched, fists tight at his sides. Sarah sat cross-legged, scribbling in the dirt with a stick, tracing the glow, matching the pulses to her own frantic marks. The ground vibrated beneath them, a low, rhythmic hum that climbed through bone and skin, not loud, but undeniable. Marcus pressed his hands to his ears. It didn't help. Above, the sky twisted stars sliding into patterns that had no name, constellations that didn't belong, the heavens reshaping themselves while the sea lapped soundlessly at the shore. Marcus closed his eyes. He wished he hadn't. The sun slipped beneath the horizon and stayed there. At first they thought it was cloud cover, some storm pulling over the island, swallowing the light. But hours passed, then a day, then another. The darkness held, thick and weighty, a night that clung to the skin, to the air, to the mind. They moved by memory, by the faint blue glow that still pulsed at the tree line, shapes bending through the forest, dancing along the rocks. Liam kept a fire burning, or what passed for fire. The dry wood here crackled strange, sparking with colors Marcus couldn't name. Marcus kept counting time. Hours, minutes, the beat of his pulse, the slow rise and fall of breath. But the rhythm fell apart. His watch flashed nonsense. His body craved sleep at odd hours, and when he closed his eyes, he couldn't tell if minutes passed or weeks. "We were somewhere else," Marcus whispered, voice dry and cracked, rocking slightly by the shore. This isn't a place." Sarah sat apart, always watching. She stopped eating first. Then she stopped speaking. She scribbled in the dirt, symbols that matched the lights in the trees, humming softly under her breath. Liam tried to snap her out of it. He shook her by the shoulders, begged her to look at him, to answer. She smiled faintly, eyes glazed, fingers still moving. Marcus watched all of it from the edge, knowing they were slipping from the same world. It happened without warning. Sarah stood at dawn, or what should have been dawn, if the sun still remembered them, and walked. No words, no glance back. Marcus felt it before he saw it, a pull in the air, a tightening in his chest, as if the island itself had shifted, holding its breath. Liam called after her once, twice, voice breaking on the second. She didn't pause. She crossed the sand, feet bare, hair tangled with salt, moving toward the trees, toward the pale flickering that waited there. The lights parted for her, curling up like smoke, like breath, like 1,000 unseen hands beckoning her deeper. Marcus wanted to run after her, but his legs wouldn't move. His body had given up on motion, on will. Liam crumpled to his knees, hands pressed to his face. Marcus watched until Sarah's outline dissolved into the dark, swallowed by trees that didn't belong, on an island that shouldn't exist, under a sky that no longer kept time. He never saw her again. Liam's voice was low when he spoke, like he was afraid the island might hear. "We can't stay," he whispered, crouched beside Marcus, eyes hollowed from hunger and sleepless nights. His hands trembled, fingers dirt-caked, nails split. "We either try or we give in." Marcus stared at him, barely understanding. His mind felt waterlogged, thoughts sluggish, as if the air had thickened inside his skull. Liam gripped his shoulder, forcing Marcus to meet his gaze. "You feel it, don't you?" Liam rasped. "It's not going to let us go, not unless we take it." Around them, the island pulsed. The lights flickered through the trees, humming low in the ground, threading into the soles of their feet, the marrow of their bones. Marcus wanted to ask about Sarah, about Chloe, about Daniel, but the words were gone, stripped away by days without end, nights without stars. "We build something," Liam muttered. "We push out. Maybe the current takes you." His voice cracked, and for the first time, Marcus saw the crack in Liam himself, the break in the man who had held them all together. "We?" Marcus croaked. Liam's eyes softened, just for a moment. "You," he said, "I'm staying." And just like that, Marcus understood. They worked through a darkness that never lifted. Driftwood lashed with vines, scraps of the wrecked gear they'd washed up with, anything that floated. Liam's hands bled as he tied the makeshift raft, knuckles raw and skin split, but he never stopped. Marcus tried to help, but his limbs were weak, his vision tunneled, his breath thin. Every knot Liam tied, every board he dragged, was a reminder. This was not a plan for two. When the raft was ready, Liam crouched beside Marcus on the shore, helping him into the shaky structure, steadying the logs beneath him. "Find the pole," Liam whispered. "Let it take you." Marcus clutched his wrist, panic flaring too late, too thin. "Come with me," he rasped. Liam smiled faintly, the man he used to be flickering across his face like a dying flame. "I have to stay." The ground vibrated, a low thrum rising through the sand. The lights pressed closer, curling at the edge of the trees. Liam shoved the raft forward, hands pushing until the water swallowed him to the waist, to the chest. Marcus felt the current seize beneath him, strange and cold and strong, dragging him outward, away. The last thing he saw was Liam on the shore, standing alone, arms at his sides, face lifted to the sky that never rose. And then the sea took him. The sea was a mouth, open and endless. Marcus drifted, lashed to the raft with cords of vine and hope, eyes cracked open just enough to see the sky writhe overhead. The stars bent and folded, some nights crowding too close, other nights gone altogether. The sun came and went without warning, slipping sideways, sometimes rising twice, sometimes not at all. He lost track of time, days, maybe weeks, maybe lifetimes. His skin blistered, cracked, peeled, his lips split until they no longer bled, his tongue swelled thick behind his teeth. Hunger came and went, a sharp thing at first, then dull, then almost companionable, a quiet voice reminding him he was still here. Sometimes he dreamed, or thought he did, of Liam on the shore, of Sarah's hands tracing symbols, of Chloe's laughter echoing through the dark, of Daniel raising his camera, one eyebrow cocked, forever waiting for the perfect shot. Other times he saw shapes beneath the water, long and silver, too smooth, too fast, circling, watching. He learned not to look too long. The raft held, barely, though it groaned and splintered with every new current, every shift in the sea. The world thinned around Marcus, narrowing to the press of salt, the burn of sun, the cold breath of night. He floated through it all, weightless, forgotten, carried by something he no longer dared to name. The first thing Marcus felt was sand. His cheek was pressed against it, gritty and hot. He coughed, mouth filled with the taste of earth, not salt. His eyes cracked open, stinging against the sun, the real sun, golden and warm, rising from the right edge of the world. Voices circled around him, urgent, unfamiliar. Hands warm, human gripped his shoulders, his wrists, turning him gently onto his back. Someone spoke in a soft, lilting voice, words he couldn't understand but clung to anyway, as if the sound alone might hold him together. Faces leaned in, dark against the light, shadows rimmed with gold. A child's eyes, wide with wonder. An old man's weathered hands brushing hair from Marcus's face. A woman murmuring prayers. The world swam, the sky rippling, but when Marcus blinked again, it held steady. The stars were where they should be. The sun was where it belonged. His lips moved, dry and cracked, barely shaping the sound. "Liam," he whispered. Then the world tilted, and Marcus fell into the dark, the voices following him down. The hospital room was cold, the kind of cold that seeped past the skin, into the bones. Marcus lay beneath thin sheets, eyes flickering open and closed, drifting between waking and something else. Machines hummed quietly at his side. A monitor beeped steady, indifferent. Authorities came, first-clipped voices, sharp suits, notebooks in hand. They asked him for dates, for names, for coordinates. They wanted details, facts, anchors, to tie his story to the real world. Marcus gave them what he could. The last known position, the moment the sky bent, the faces of his crew as they slipped away one by one. But when he spoke of the island, of the nights without sunrise, of Sarah walking into the light, the room cooled further. "Are you certain?" one agent asked, voice carefully neutral. Marcus stared past him, lips cracked, eyes glassy. Emily came. She sat at his bedside, hands shaking, a wedding band turning round and round her finger. She asked no questions, only held his hand. Tom stood in the doorway, jaw clenched. Ava watched from the hall, arms crossed tight, nails digging into her skin. Mark sat in the corner, elbows on his knees, eyes hollow. The media called it a miracle. Headlines splashed his name across screens. "Sole survivor returns." But behind the cameras, the whispers spread. Some called him blessed. Others called him broken. The investigation was open again, but no one knew what they were really looking for. The experts arrived next. Psychologists, neurologists, trauma specialists. They spoke in low, measured tones, discussing survival psychology, hallucinations from dehydration, the collapse of linear time under extreme isolation. "Memory distortion," one said calmly, tapping a pen against his notes. "He's rewriting the narrative to survive the guilt." Paranormal investigators appeared on podcasts, on late-night specials, dissecting Marcus's every word. They mapped his accounts against other triangle vanishings, hunting for patterns, for proof. Skeptics dismissed it all. They pointed to the human brain's limits, the way it cracks under pressure, invents monsters when it cannot bear the truth. But there were others, families of the lost, believers, wanderers, who clung to Marcus's story with trembling hands. Maybe it hadn't been an accident. Maybe it wasn't madness. Maybe, just maybe, something waited out there still. Marcus sat by the window, eyes on the horizon, sun sinking behind rooftops. He barely spoke now, but sometimes, late at night, nurses heard him whisper not prayers, not explanations, just a single name. Liam. The nurse found the bed empty just before dawn. She had checked on Marcus at midnight, seen him asleep, his face pale against the pillow, chest rising and falling in shallow, even breaths. His vitals were steady. His pulse, his blood pressure all stable. At 3 a.m., the monitors flatlined, not with a warning or alarm, but a quiet blankness, as if the machines themselves had been disconnected from something deeper. When they opened the door, the room was cold, colder than it should have been. The sheets were pulled back neatly, the pillow faintly indented, the IV dangling untouched. His clothes were still folded on the chair. There was no sign of a struggle, no security footage showing him leaving, no alarms tripped. It was as if Marcus Hale had never been there at all. The news broke within hours. Sole survivor missing headlines flashed. Cameras clustered outside the hospital, reporters shouting over one another, trying to explain the impossible. For Emily, for Tom, for Ava, for Mark, the nightmare cracked open all over again. Authorities searched the grounds, the city, the ports. International alerts were sent. But no one found him. No one ever saw him leave. And in the hospital room, on the window ledge where Marcus had often sat, one faint trace remained, the imprint of a hand. Not his too long, too thin, pressed from the outside. The satellites caught it first. A routine scan, a pass over the North Atlantic, logged something it shouldn't have, a disturbance. Not a storm, not a surge, something else. A low pulse, rhythmic, centered near the last known coordinates of the echo. The pattern was strange, repeating at intervals too precise for weather, too irregular for machine error. When the data was cross-checked, another anomaly surfaced, a cluster of signals, faint and buried in noise, broadcasting from beneath the surface. No distress call, no standard frequency, just a repeated burst. Audio engineers pulled the waveform. It was fragmented, degraded, but when run through software, something like a voice emerged. It was garbled, broken, almost erased. But there, at the edge, layered under static and distortion, a name surfaced. Marcus. Analysts went silent. Technicians checked and rechecked their systems. And far out over the Atlantic, near the coordinates where 5 divers had once disappeared, the sea stirred, just faintly, as if remembering. The signal came in just after midnight. A research vessel, the Calypso Dawn, drifting 70 miles off Bermuda, caught it on a band they weren't even monitoring, a thin, broken transmission, cutting through static like a whisper through a storm. At first, the crew thought it was bleed over, maybe an old military channel or ghost chatter from a buoy. But when the audio tech boosted the levels, the room fell silent. It was a voice. Male, hoarse, barely there. "This is Liam." It rasped, stretched thin by distance, by time, by something no one could name. "Do not come looking." The signal fractured, breaking apart, but the voice came again, like a last breath forced through torn lungs. "Do not come looking." Then only static, the kind that raises the hair on your arms, that feels like more than just sound. The ship's captain logged the coordinates. They matched the last known location of the echo. The report made it back to the mainland by morning. Within hours, it was everywhere, news alerts, trending hashtags, breaking headlines. Investigators scrambled. Families held their breath. Military monitors cross-checked the data, radar technicians ran simulations, and skeptics on TV called it a hoax. But the audio remained, and under the noise, Under the distortion, one final sound pulsed. A soft, low hum, like the earth itself whispering back. In the weeks that followed, nothing else surfaced. No more signals, no debris, no sightings. Just questions. Emily sat at home, Liam's wedding ring in her palm, fingers curled tight around the band. She played the message once, twice, until the battery on her phone gave out. She didn't know if the voice was a gift or a wound she would never close. Tom walked the beach, toes sinking into wet sand, eyes on the horizon, waiting for a shape to rise from the surf that never came. Ava held Daniel's last video in her hands, frame paused on his smiling face, mouth half open as if he were about to tell her something important. Mark left Chloe's room untouched. He sat on her bed, whispered to the walls. The world spun on. Scientists debated magnetic anomalies. Psychologists spoke of survivor's guilt, group delusions. Conspiracy theorists drew maps, drew connections, drew darkness across the sea. But in the end, no one knew. Why only Marcus came back? Why he vanished again? Or why, even now, late at night, if you tune the radio just right, out over the Atlantic, you might still hear someone whispering, "Do not come looking." This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.